By now, you know his name. George Floyd died under the knee of an officer in Minnesota in May. But he's hardly the only person to die, face down and handcuffed, under an arresting officer. 9 Wants to Know spent months tracking more than 100 deaths, some known, some not, across the U.S. They all died after they were left prone. As investigative reporter Chris Vanderveen shows us, each time, officers who should have known better apparently didn't.
If you'll start toward North Carlton Avenue for an EMS assist.
Lying on the ground and banging his head on the ground.
It's going to be the reporting party's son. What is his name?
Daniel.
EMS responding
What's
to
his
North
last
Carlton.
name?
It's going to be a Daniel Turner.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
It's my son. He's out running around. I think he's on something.
Okay.
On a dark street, at a late hour, an unarmed man named Daniel died.
134, got him detained.
Underneath the bodies of those called to help him.
Temper. Copy, subject is detained.
Just relax for a second, okay? Daniel, keep breathing, okay? Just relax. Can you breathe? Daniel, keep breathing, man. Daniel. 34, CPR in progress.
Copy, CPR in progress.
4118.
4118.
Subject has stopped breathing.
4118. Copy, subject has stopped breathing.
You're mad.
Absolutely. Beyond mad, yes. He should be here right now.
Walter and Tammy Turner watched their 41-year-old son struggle shortly after police officers took him to the ground.
There was no resistance. He was just trying to maneuver to breathe. They would not let him up to breathe. When you physically see it, there is no way in the world you can't tell me what happened.
An autopsy concluded the 41-year-old died from the toxic effects of methamphetamine use. But that wasn't all. As he called the death a homicide, the forensic pathologist added another cause: physical restraint applied by officers while Daniel Turner was handcuffed and prone. In other words, face down, limited inability to adequately breathe.
He was handcuffed.
And they're still on top of him.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In the U.S., officers use prone restraint daily.
Just prone him out.
Most of the time, it results in little more than an arrest. But on occasion, the face-down hold results
Is he knocked out or he ain't dead, is he?
results in something else.
Hey, you good, man? Hey, I don't feel anything.
He's dead.
Concerned about cases like these, the U.S. Department of Justice in 1995 warned officers of what it called a little-known phenomenon called positional asphyxia, or death as a result of a body position that interferes with one's ability to breathe. In 2003, the topic made it into this New York City police training video.
This tape will teach you about how the human body reacts.
The message was simple. As soon as a prone suspect is handcuffed, get him off his stomach.
You have a long history as a police officer, correct?
I do. I was a police officer in Providence, Rhode Island for 20 years.
Jack Ryan spends the majority of his year training police officers around the country.
Get off him. Get him on his side. Get him upright.
He says if an officer isn't aware of the risk by now, that officer isn't paying attention.
As I've said in training at times that we ought to have that printed on the dashboard of the police car and maybe tattooed to the back of everybody's hand. Get off them and get them into a position that facilitates breathing.
All the way down. Okay.
Once handcuffed, turn them over. Keep an eye on the face. That's it. Advice Ryan, a former cop himself, says does not put officers' lives at risk.
There's really no downside. There's only upside to it. You know, like I say, and I say this in training, what do you lose by that?
Hey, bud, just breathe. Hold on, man. Stop, man.
And yet, if this story dealt only with Daniel Turner's story, you might be excused for considering it an aberration.
Anthony.
Here's the thing, however. It's not.
Relax, okay? Stop fighting.
You're not getting up, Drew.
The more you move, the longer this lasts.
After months spent examining autopsy reports, court filings, and news stories, we found example after example of law enforcement agencies largely ignoring the warnings.
He's out. Oh. Hey, he's cold.
We now know of at least 107 deaths that followed prone restraint since 2010. There are likely many more.
He was on the ground for too long with his handcuffed with his hands behind his back with too many police officers on top of him.
We found families impacted by loss in places like Louisiana, Texas, North Carolina, California, and Arizona.
And the fact that it continues to happen today is why I'm talking to you now.
In a country nearly 2/3 white, more than 2/3 of the deaths we found involved people who were not.
The priority has to be protecting and preserving human life.
The head of the country's Black Law Enforcement Alliance, himself a former New York City police detective, says,
Code 4, lift the red, 1 in custody.
What we found is inexcusable.
No brainer, it's obvious, and now it's time for the law enforcement and the policing community to catch up.
More than half of the deaths involve people battling mental illness.
Sheriff, doing all right?
And most of what prompted the police responses in the first place involve calls of someone acting erratically.
Have you ever done this before?
No.
Calls much like the one that sent Farmington officers onto this dark street 2 years ago.
We had a medical emergency. That's what we called for.
Keep breathing, okay? Just relax.
Tammy and Walter Turner say it felt like hours. In truth, body cameras tell us it was more like 3 minutes.
Just relax for a second, okay?
From the handcuffs to the realization Daniel wasn't breathing.
Daniel.
A doctor who reviewed the case on behalf of the parents concluded in this deposition, Daniel died because he was unable to maximally ventilate. He died because he couldn't purge his body of carbon dioxide.
It happened on our street. It happened 2 doors down.
2 years later, they remain so scarred by what they saw, they still won't head that way when leaving their home.
Me and Walter do not drive down our street.
We've never driven down since it happened. We won't go that way.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, I'll get on the ground. Okay, do it. Get down. On your knees. Come on. On the ground.
Bring it up. Yep, he's on. He's cuffed.
Hey, let him sit there a second.
Okay, everybody take a breather.
You need a breather? You want me to get up on me?
You'll spot it too, should you watch enough of these.
Sir, we're not killing you.
You're not going to die. Stop.
A pattern.
Hey, you're okay. You're okay. You're gonna be all right.
Officers seem surprised each time.
Hey. Roll him over.
Breathing? Anthony.
Hey. I don't think he's not doing anything, guys. Hey.
Oh, he didn't just die down there, did he?
I don't think he did.
Is he breathing?
They shouldn't be surprised considering warnings like these written into many police department training manuals. A prone position can make it more difficult to breathe. At the earliest possible time, the arrestee should be placed on their side or a seated position. So why isn't that always happening?
You need to change this culture in police departments where they believe they can do no wrong.
Attorney Isaac Schwager has sued police departments for not recognizing the potential dangers of prone restraint. He says dozens of times when officers get sued, they've relied on the studies and testimony of one doctor in particular.
You call him a hired gun.
Well, he is a hired gun.
That, quote, hired gun.
Your thoughts on that?
Is Dr. Gary Vilk of San Diego, California.
I am paid for my services, so I do get paid, so I'm hired. Not necessarily a hired gun in my mind.
You just said not necessarily. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's a term somebody's using. I get hired for my expertise and for giving opinions.
Dr. Vilk's studies have concluded prone restraint is not dangerous.
That answer is no. The position itself is physiologically neutral.
According to his own testimony, he's paid $1,000 an hour to provide such testimony. He insists his studies are sound, that the human body can take a lot of bodies on top of it, and that these cases represent a problem of optics, because most of these deaths are due to sudden cardiac arrest.
It looks a lot better, it's a lot less confusing to a jury if the person has a cardiac arrest with nobody on top of them than if there's several people holding them down at that point.
There's just one big problem. Sometimes those juries don't buy it.
Is it fair to say the jury did not believe Vilk's testimony?
I think that much is obvious.
Schwager last year secured a $4 million verdict on behalf of the family of Branch Roth, an amount that this year was whittled down to $2 million. Roth died while held prone underneath members of the Rohnert Park, California Police Department.
That's where I'm struggling here, is that this idea that the science is definitive, that your work is definitive, and yet you lose. Your side loses. And sometimes when they lose big.
So I don't consider myself I lost. I tried to educate a jury on the facts, the data, the materials out there, the research.
About that research,
do you think sometimes this can be used as an excuse for behavior that did lead to somebody's death?
In my experience, yes, that is the case sometimes.
Dr. Stephen Bird says he believes he knows why people tend to die underneath officers.
Go ahead and dispatch ambulance as a protocol.
The University of Massachusetts professor of emergency medicine says the risk of asphyxiation is real, although not in the way you might think.
This is actually a really serious, severe, scary medical time where if we don't do the right thing, these patients can die.
He says, look at it this way. As the body struggles to get oxygen, it produces lactic acid. When acid levels rise, the pH level drops. Yes, it's weird that way. The body likes a pH level of 7.4. The more you work or struggle, the more acid you produce. Normally, the body regulates this with the help of the carbon dioxide you exhale. But let's say something limits that. Carbon dioxide builds, acid levels rise, pH drops, you struggle even more. The situation spirals until finally, with a pH level below 7, breathing slows and the system crashes.
Even a small degree of ventilatory impairment, decreased ability to ventilate in the setting of a severe metabolic acidosis, has severe consequences.
His solution sounds a lot like those police training manuals. As soon as a suspect is handcuffed, get off him.
It's my opinion that would save lives.
Which brings us back to that pattern we noticed when we watched all of those videos.
You didn't want to listen, did you?
You know, when you're being attacked or you think you're being attacked,
stop resisting!
You fight back.
Yeah, his arm's cuffed.
The day before George Floyd died in Minnesota,
Yeah, he's got a pulse.
Chad Burnett remained face down, handcuffed, and motionless for more than 3 minutes inside his Colorado Springs home.
Wouldn't that say something to you? Like, maybe there's something wrong here.
His close friend, Brett Lindstrom, noticed the pattern as well.
Chad, you gotta chill for us, okay, buddy? Go on.
He had gotten quiet, and yet, you know, they're having this conversation while he's dying.
In the middle of a mental health crisis, Chad Burnett stopped breathing. His death, one of more than 100 we found, that seemed to catch officers off guard.
Hey, you with us? Come on, buddy. Chad.
Heard a little breathing.
Hey, Chad. Chad. Wake up, pal. Start compressions.